Hey family, today IVE found an ultra-exciting novel. The hero ends entry. As the legendary Last Lupine heir, she's in the spotlight, but she has a fatal flaw she can't shift. In a school that emphasizes supernatural powers, it's like being labeled as an outsider. While everyone thought she'd fall into desperation, she resists fate's fix. She refuses to hide her true identity, standing bravely in the spotlight, breaking prejudices with her wisdom and courage, and proving her worth. Moreover, she uncovers some shocking secrets along the way. Chapter 12. The coach was nothing like I had envisioned. Instead of the towering, scowling giant it imagined, a man barely taller than myself stood before the class, his voice echoing through the training grounds of Crescent Academy as he barked out harsh critiques and seemingly impossible demands. Despite his shorter stature, his presence was undeniable. Clad in tactical pants and a Crescent Academy polo, he exuded an air of authority that reminded me more of a seasoned law enforcement officer than one of the world's most renowned shifter professors. Yet, according to Atlas, that's exactly who he was. McKinley. Coach Hess' voice boomed, causing me to flinch. You call that shifting? My deceased grandmother could do better. Explain to me how that's possible. I watched as McKinley's face flushed a deep purple, his third attempt at shifting clearly unsuccessful. The coach's piercing gaze then swung to another student. Rojas, if you take any longer to shift, you'll be an easy target for marksmen. He bellowed. This isn't one of those anime transformations you secretly watch when you think I'm not paying attention. Rojas averted his eyes, clearly embarrassed as snickers rippled through the group of students. I felt a twinge of sympathy for them both, grateful that I was yet the focus of Coach's attention. That reprieve was short-lived. Coach's blazing blue eyes locked onto mine where I stood slightly behind Atlas. His gaze darted between us, a question forming in his expression. Are you planning to hide behind him all day? He snapped at me. Or are you going to join the class and actually earn your grade? I narrowed my eyes at him, defiance rising within me. As I took a step forward, away from Atlas' protective presence, I felt a sudden grip on my wrist. Atlas had reached out, halting my movement. I have explicit orders from the Penta regarding Nova's participation in this class. Coach, Atlas stated firmly, producing a folded letter from his pocket. I believe you'll find the explanation you're seeking in this document. Coach snatched the letter from Atlas' hand, tucking it into his back pocket without so much as a glance. I couldn't help but wonder what those explicit orders entailed, and why I hadn't been informed of them myself. I don't have time to read pretty little bureaucratic bullshit, Lobo, he said, crossing his arms. Tell me what it says. I'd rather have you read it, Coach, he says, glancing at our classmates, too many nosy fucks not minding their own damn business. I glanced around to find everyone of eyes on us, a majority of them stopping what they were doing to focus their attention on us. I'll read the damn letter later, he snapped at me, motioning for me to join the back of the line for now. You need to get the fuck out of my class. I passed you already, so there's no reason why you're still here bugging me. Atlas smirked at the coach, nodding to where the letter was residing in his pocket. I've missed you to Coach. Atlas scooted so much in fact that I decided to take a refresher course. Whispers erupted from around us, mainly questioning why an heir would want to repeat the hardest class in Crescent Academy history. Others were questioning why Atlas was still holding onto my wrist. I yanked it out of his grasp, taking a giant step away from him, rubbing at the spot where his warm, callous hand met my skin. Atlas sighed at my behavior, taking a step forward which brought him closer to me. Coach reared his head back in shock, ripping the letter from his pocket and scanning its contents. His eyes snapped to mine, shocking lining that blue gaze. I had no doubt that whatever he read in that letter was related to my situation, namely my inability to shift. Coach's head snapped around to our spectators, the crowd large and eager as they took in the scene before them. Did I say you all could stop training to gawk at me? He roared. Get back to work or I'll make you repeat my course. Since you'll love my face so much, I bet it'll be no problem for you to come stare at it over the break. The crowd dispersed quickly after that, and Coach stomped over to where I was standing, grabbing me by the arm and dragging me inside the Coliseum. Well, he tried to drag me, separating the two of us with lightning-fast speed, a growl rumbling from low in his throat. "Don't touch her," he muttered, yanking the coach's hands off of me. The coach countered his movements with some maneuvers of his own which had Atlas stumbling on his ass. "Remember I taught what you needed to know in order to survive outside the wards," Coach growled, "but I didn't teach you everything I knew." Instead of getting angry like I expected him to, Atlas merely smiled. The psycho smiled. And before Coach could even blink, he was laying flat on his back and staring up at the sky. The wind knocked out of him. Everyone gasped in equal parts shock and horror. "You might not have taught me everything you know," Coach Atlas said, "but don't forget I have a few tricks up my sleeves as well." A few seconds of silence before the coach started laughing. Uncomfortable chuckles of alarm rang out as a few students took a few steps away from us, like they knew something that I didn't. Coach jumped up off the floor quickly, dusting off his pants as he continued to chuckle. "Fine," Coach said, "I'll let you stay in my class on one condition." "What is it?" "You may not interfere," he said, his tone serious. "She must complete this course on her own. No assistance from you whatsoever." Atlas' eyes wide, and he looked like he wanted to argue when Coach spoke up again. "And in order to ensure that you follow this rule, you'll be locked in a cage," he informed him. "Every session we have, you'll be in one of those cages." "You can't." "I can," Coach growled, "and I will. That is my stipulation. The Penta might have me by the metaphorical balls, but this is still my class. I still decide what goes on with my students." By the time class ended, I knew that it was a matter of time before the gossip of whatever today spread like wildfire. I stomped out of the Fenrir Coliseum in anger, the giant and annoying shadow following my every movement step for step. The moment we were no longer surrounded by students sending me curious looks as they exited the Coliseum, I whirled on Atlas. "What was in that letter?" I demanded. "What letter?" He played innocent. "Don't act stupid," I growled. "What was in that damn letter?" "I don't know." I shot him a deadpan look. "I really don't know." Atlas shrugged. "I didn't open it." I scoffed. "You're right. I didn't read it, Nova," he said seriously, frowning. "It would be considered a crime punishable by banishment to open a Penta letter." "Then why did you say that the letter would answer all the coach's questions?" I asked. "How did you know it would be a sufficient enough explanation for him?" He shrugged. "Regardless if it was enough explanation, the letter was from the Penta, so it had to be enough for him. And you called and pull him." "I don't know anywhere else to give him that letter or have that conversation," I asked, poking him in the chest. "Now the whole school is going to be gossiping about me tomorrow." "What's the difference between today and tomorrow?" he muttered so low that I almost didn't catch it. "Almost." "What?" I reared my head back. "What does that mean?" He sighed, closing his eyes and tilting his head back in a way that had him looking at the sky. I gazed at the dark tattoos that curled up and behind his neck, and for some strange reason, I had the strongest urge to trace my index finger around those swirling tattoos. The urge was so strong that my fingers twitched at the mere thought. Those amber eyes flashed open and gazed down at me, a sigh crossing those full lips. "Nova, everyone hasn't been able to stop talking about you since the moment you got here," he said, his lips curled up in a half-smile, "and that won't change until some other scandal happens to divert their attention elsewhere." He nodded towards the university. "You're either Last Lupine heir, Nova," he said. "You're either the biggest thing that has happened here since, well, ever." While my little display might add a little more gasoline to the fire, it won't stop the people from talking. "But now they'll know that something is up with me," I whispered you. "The letter. It'll make people realize that I don't have, that I can't." Before I could finish that sentence, Atlas yanked me into his chest, cradling my head against his broad shoulders. I gasped. "What are you?" "There are ears everywhere and no sound stones around to protect us." He leaned down fractionally so he was able to whisper in my ear. "No one must find out that you haven't developed your gift yet. If they did, then it would not only be catastrophic for all packs, but you would be subjected to even more danger." "More danger?" I reared back my head. "I thought I was safe here." I thought the whole reason why you and the Penta kidnapped and brought me here was to ensure my safety. His lips pursed. We attend a shifter university, Nova. He took a step away from me. Palming the back of his neck's safety is never guaranteed when it comes to ill-tempered shifters. He walked past me, letting his finger trail across my cheek as he walked away. The intensity of his final words chilled me to the core. Safety, especially when it comes to us heirs, is a luxury we cannot afford to take lightly. Chapter 13. Nova Nix. I was in study hall, going over some notes for class when suddenly the chair in front of me was pulled out and a lithe body filled its empty space. I looked up and immediately locked eyes with familiar dark ones. Saoirse Fowl sat across from me, her composure calm, cool, and collected as her aura irradiated something that immediately made me on edge. Why hello new girl, she cooed at me. I don't think I had a chance to formally introduce myself. My name is Saoirse Fowl, I answered on a sigh, leaning back in my chair as I tapped my pen against the wooded table. Heir Fowl's niece and top female pure blood in our graduating class. So you've heard of me. Her smile wide and how wonderful. This makes things so much easier on my end. I raised an eyebrow, not really understand what she was trying to get at. I know you're new to our world, new girl, so I forgive you for not knowing how things work around here. She started, so I wanted to take some time out of my busy schedule to inform you myself, in order to avoid certain miscommunications. What kind of miscommunications? I need you to stay away from Phoenix, she said in a matter-of-fact tone, like if it was the most simplest and easiest task for me to follow. And while I understand that being an heir means that you have to share a house with him and all, I need you to minimize contact with him as much as possible. I gaped at her in open shock, my mouth literally hanging open for a few seconds. I shook my head to clear my thoughts. You want me to stay away from a guy who I'm literally forced to live with? A guy who TAs my shifter lore class? A guy I have to see and attend their meetings with every week? She nodded her head in seriousness. Why, she blinked at me. What? Why would I do that? I repeated my question. Why would I take such unnecessary steps and go out of my way to avoid my fellow heir? I paused and asked, or am I supposed to do the same thing for the other two too? How am I supposed to avoid all three roommates at once? I don't care what you do or don't do for the other two. She shook her head. But I need you to stay away from Phoenix. My fiancé shouldn't have to be subjected to another female in his personal space, just because she's a colleague. Fiancé, my eyes wide, and at the word, what do you mean fiancé? You're engaged to Phoenix. The words tasted acidic on my tongue, and the thought of that grumpy bastard with the sad blue eyes being engaged to her made me feel hollow and murderous for some reason. She nodded. We've been engaged to each other since we were children. She unlocked her phone and scrolled through it for a minute before flipping it over and showing me what was on the screen. My heart dropped at the sight of a young and stoic Phoenix standing next to a love-stricken Saoirse, her eyes gazing adoringly up at him. She looked at him like he hung the sun and stars just for her. He couldn't have been more than 9 or 10 in this photo. Those eyes still the same shade of blue as they were now, but held a different emotion in their depths. Anger and fiery determination. I wonder what must have happened in the time between then and now that made him lose that fiery look in his eyes and replace it with his current sadness. No, the words escaped me before I could stop them. Harsher than I ever would have expected. I won't do it. What? My eyes lifted and immediately locked on that burning gaze of hers. She was pissed. What did you just say? She asked, her tone eerily calm. I'm not going to go out of my way to avoid Phoenix, I said. And while I can understand your discomfort with him being in a house with another woman, I won't actively go out of my way to avoid my roommate. If you have a problem with that, then I suggest you go to the Penta yourself. How dare you? She growled. Do you not have any respect for the sacred bonds of? I narrowed my eyes at her. I wouldn't finish that sentence if I were you. Or what? She leaned forward, her eyes darkening even further. What could you possibly do to me? Impractically and heir myself. But technicality doesn't count, I murmured. Just because your aunt's an heir doesn't mean that you are. She leaned forward, her eyes radiating pure hate. And just because you're dead, just because your dead daddy was a Lupine doesn't mean that you'll ever live up to the name. With those final words, she stood up and left, her words hitting the intended target they were meant to, because the little slip of doubt that was in my mind just grew a tiny bit larger. How was I supposed to take down the people that tore me away from my family if I couldn't even gain the skills I needed to survive? I stormed through the house like a woman on a mission. While Saoirse's words hurt me in the moment, I cowed and held the anger that followed after I realized that I was letting her get to me. I followed the rambunctious laughter coming from the kitchen, glad that all three morons were in the same place. Good. They'll all be there to witness what I have to say at the same time. I swung open the kitchen door so hard that it banged against the wall. The conversation died immediately as three sets of eyes locked on my angry form. I walked up to where Phoenix was sitting and slapped my hand on the table next to his plate, bending down so that his eyes were locked with mine. Oh shit. I heard Cassie Ann mutter she looks beyond pissed. Shatlas shushed him. Why didn't you tell me? Tell you what. He continued to eat his chicken like I washed up in his face, threatening him. Why didn't you tell me about your fiancé? I growled. Do you know how hard it was me to try to defend myself against the woman basically calling me a whore just because I wouldn't actively go out of my way to avoid you? What? He choked on a bite of his chicken, reaching forward to grab at his cup of water. What the hell are you talking about? Saoirse just cornered me in the library. I growled, telling me that I had to stay away from you because she considered it disrespectful for another woman to be in the same proximity as her man. Vampire deception. I drank Nathan and EY Dwet. As an undocumented changeling, I'm forced to cause as a low-level witch. His eyes wide and wan. Right now I shook my head. Why does it matter when it happened? The only thing that matters is that it happened, and that I'm definitely on her shit list. Just going to be out for my blood now. What did you tell her? Atlas asked, curiosity lacing his tone. I glanced at him. What did you tell her when she demanded you to stay away from Phoenix? He asked, his head tilted to the side. Are you going to stay away from PHE? I pursed my lips as I felt Phoenix's eyes on the back of my head. I told her no, I said, standing to my full height and the grump behind me. Why would I go out of my way to avoid him if I have to live with the jackass? Cassie Ann whistled low. Yeah. You're definitely on her shit list now. I glanced back at Phoenix. So why didn't you tell me? I didn't tell you because I don't have a fiancé, he sighed. Leaning back in his chair, I called the engagement off the moment I turned 18. I reared my head back in surprise. What? Atlas and Cassie Ann nodded at his friend's words. Phoenix was the one who asked the Penta to inquire about the foul heir's true parentage. Phoenix flinched. It was the only way to get me out of that awful marriage contract. Marriage contract. I parroted like idiot. What contract? The boys all sent each other looks. I narrowed my eyes at them all. What aren't you three telling me? You should sit down for this, Nova. Atlas said, pulling out a chair for me. Why? Because this may be a little bit of a shock to you, Cassie Ann said slowly, but technically, all the heirs are entered into a marriage contract by the time they're born until they're 5 years of age. And we can't dissolve that contract unless reasonable doubt is proven, Atlas said with a shrug, and Phoenix proved that doubt in order to get out of that archaic tradition. Lucky bastard. Cassie Ann muttered. So all of you. I looked at each of them. Are engaged to someone? Kind of. What does that mean? That? I gasped in sudden realization. Am I engaged to someone too? 3 growls sounded out from the room, much of their postures turning rigid. No, Phoenix said through gritted teeth. We won't let that happen. But I'm an heir too, I said, and since the Penta insists on following tradition, then that means that. It means nothing, Cassie Ann snarled. You shouldn't be subjected to such an awful fate. And you three should. I argued. How is that fair? No one's getting engaged. Atlas redirected the conversation. We're not going to let that happen to you. Phoenix nodded in agreement, and technically, I was the only one currently engaged. My eyes scrunched up in confusion, but I thought. My younger brother fell in love with my supposed fiancé. Atlas gave me a half smile, since her family runs one of the biggest packs in Latin America, and didn't want her to give up her position as the new alpha in order to marry me. They allowed an exception that fulfilled the Lobos portion of the heir marriage contract. Another lucky bastard. Cassie Ann muttered. My gaze swung to him. What about you? I'm engaged, he said miserably, and since an only child. I don't have anyone to bail me out. Does she go here? My gaze softened. Is someone else going to add me to their shit list too? I don't think she goes here. Cassian shook his head. I don't even know where she goes. Cass hasn't met her yet, Atlas said softly. Unlike me and Phoenix, Cass's parents are waiting until he graduates to announce his betrothal. I thought heirs were the next rulers of the shifter community, I said, leaning back in my seat. So if that's the case, then why are you being forced to marry someone against your will? Can't you say no to all of this? They collectively shook their heads. There are 2 rules heirs must implicitly follow in order to receive their rightful position as the Pental Eaters. Phoenix said, the first being that the Penta chooses the partners for their heirs based on how useful these alliances could be to their ruling region. And the second rule was hard to follow until now, Atlas murmured to himself, confusing me even further. Phoenix shot his friend a scathing look before addressing my question. Heirs cannot fall in love with other heirs, he said, locking eyes with me, for the power balance between the shifter community would shift exponentially and potentially devastate other relationships between the packs. Chapter 14, Nova Nix. And that concludes our lesson today, class, Professor Estrella announced, dismissing her students as she concluded her lecture. I'll see you all here next week. I was just about finished packing up my laptop and books when the professor's voice rang out, making me freeze. Ms. Lupine. A word, if you will. The gazes of the few kids still lingering in the classroom shot between the professor and me as I made my way down towards her podium. She sent scathing looks to the remaining students who hurried out of the classroom like their asses were on fire before turning back towards me, a sympathetic smile on her face. Ms. Lupine, I wanted to discuss your recent test scores in my class. She bent down to pull out some papers out of her work bag. As you can see, your exams have been subpar at best. I'm afraid if you keep it up at this rate, you'll fail out before spring break. I just stared at the 3 big facts on my papers, wondering how in the world this could have happened. I've never got less than an 85 in any of my schoolwork, proud that despite working 2 jobs to help my mom out with the mortgage, I never dropped below my B average. But I studied for these exams. I croaked. I read and reread everything at least 3 times. I used all the same study habits I used before at my old school. How could I have failed so miserably? The curriculum at Crescent Academy is much more rigorous and unique than it is in the human realm, she said, while I have no doubt that you did, indeed, study for these exams. I'm afraid that the techniques you used to study for them weren't quite effective like they would have been for your human courses. What can I do? I asked, looking at her desperately. I can't fail out of this class. She shot me a sympathetic smile. My best advice would be to find a tutor. A tutor? I said, how would I go about finding one? You wouldn't have to look far. She smiled at me. Mr. Lacoste took this course freshman year and passed with flying colors. I would start by asking him if he could tutor you. I'm sure he'd be willing to help a fellow heir out. I internally groaned at her solution because while I had no doubt that Cassian would help me if I pleaded enough, I just know he'd get some kind of sick and twisted enjoyment and my begging. My stubborn pride wanted me to see if there's alternative to this predicament. And there isn't any extra credit I could do in order to make these exams up? I asked, a sliver of hope lining my voice. I would much rather try to do this on my own before involving someone else. She shook her head even before I even finished my sentence. Ms. Lupine, I could give you extra credit work from now until the semester ends and you still wouldn't have enough points to cover these 3 exams, she said, and let's not forget the next 3 exams you have coming up in addition to the final exam. A tutor is the only real option you have left at this point. I'm afraid. I took about 3 deep breaths before I knocked on Cassian's door. It was about 9:30 at night, and while the house was quiet, all the boys retiring to their beds early this Thursday evening, I knew Cassian wasn't sleeping yet. The lights from his room were still on from what I could tell based on the little sliver that was peeking out from underneath his door. His door, very much like mine, was intricately carved with various moons and wolf-like attributes, like paw prints or trees. Unlike my door, however, it looked like most of his pack history derived from the Greek culture. Greek words, phrases, and symbols all covered his door, making me super curious about what they meant. I raised my hand to knock again, when the door flew open and I was met with a sight that had my mouth drying up quicker than the Sahara Desert. Nova. A shirtless Cassian leaned against his doorframe, his soundproof headphones pushed up and off one ear as his light race, wet pants hung dangerously low on his sharp hip bones. Nova. What's wrong? Are you okay? I swallowed down what felt like sandpaper in my throat. Need your help. He straightened, immediately whipping off his headphones and throwing what looked like to be a video game controller onto his bed. What's wrong, Nova? He asked, his tone worried as he bent down fractionally to look into my eyes. Is it Brutus? Did he get stuck behind the bookshelf again? My lips quirked up at the memory of when I found all 3 boys in my bedroom trying to corral my blind dog out from behind my bookshelf. No, I said after a moment. Brutus is safely tucked into bed. Thanks for the stairs, by the way. She is able to get up and down much easier now. I'm glad. Cassian smiled. All that jumping was making his arthritis worse. My icy heart thawed at his words. I wouldn't admit this out loud, but there was nothing sexier than a man who cared about the well-being of animals. However, the gray sweatpants that outlined everything were a very close second, though. I shook my head, clearing my thoughts and focusing back to the task at hand. I took another deep, calming breath in. I need a tutor, I finally blurted out, and failing my medicinal review course, and it seems like nothing I'm doing is working. I need your help. Cassian's eyes wide hand around my wrist and yanking me into his room, shutting the door closed as softly as he could. You're failing Estrella's course? He asked, guiding me to sit on the trunk at the end of his bed. I nodded, looking over his shoulder at some game poster hanging above his desk with a clenched jaw. How? I don't know. I sent him a small glare. I'm using the same study techniques I used back home, but apparently it's not working. Estrella suggested I find a tutor and mentioned that you were one of her best students. So here I am. His eyes softened. Of course they'll help you. I let out a breath of relief. Thank you. On one condition, though. I tensed, glancing at him warily. What is it? The others can't find out what we're doing, he said slowly. Actually, no one can find out that I'm tutoring you. Why not? He winced. I rather have them not know how well I'm doing in my courses. I looked at him in confusion. You don't want your friends to know how smart you are. He looked away, his cheeks tinting pink. It's not just that. Then what is it? Unlike me, PhD and Atlas. He smiled at me. And now you. Heirs of the past usually weren't friends. While they tolerated each other for the sake of their packs, there was no relationship beyond them, just being the heirs. While everyone at school knows we're friendly with each other, they don't realize the extent our friendship goes beyond us being just heirs. While we may have our disagreements at times, I consider those men out there my brothers and to do anything for them. If they realize how close we are, then some outliers in our packs might cause some trouble for us. Your own pack would turn on you. Not everyone, but you can never be too sure. He shrugged. Power can turn even the most loyal pack member into a villain. But that still doesn't explain why you don't want anyone to know how smart you are. If people realize how smart I am, they'll have to live up to certain expectations. He sighed. And having the top scientist in pack history for a mom is a path I definitely don't want to follow. I sighed. I'm never going to get the hang of this pack stuff. You will in time. He grinned at me, reaching forward to tug a piece of my hair. We just have more experience with these fucked up pack politics. I cowed and helped, the small grin tugging at my lips. Thank you. For what? For helping me, I smirked, even if it does mess with your cool air status. He laughed out loud, quickly clamping a hand over his mouth to muffle the sound. Get out of here, princess, before you get me in trouble. He leaned back in the desk chair, running a hand through his blonde hair and ruffling it up even more. I snickered all the way towards the door, thanking him once again as I closed it awfully behind me. What I didn't hear any shuffling from his side. I sighed and leaned against the door. My eyes flew open and I took a giant step away from Cassian's door when I heard a creak from my left. My gaze clashed with brilliant blue ones, the sadness momentarily replaced with an unknown emotion. Before I could explain myself, Phoenix slunk wordlessly back into the shadows. Chapter 15. The. Where are we? I asked Cassian as followed his lit up the winding hilltop. The Lycos Ridge, he said. grabbing my hand to steady me when I tripped over my own feet. Kids don't come up here unless there's a party or annual back-to-school bonfire. I can see why I grumbled too much freaking walking. He looked back at me. I don't think I've ever met a wolf that hates the outdoors as much as you do. I've never liked the outdoors. I wrinkled my nose. Too many bugs and creepy crawlies. Not to mention, the sun is an absolute scorcher. I much prefer the indoors, where it's dark and I can curl up in bed with a good book. I think we kidnapped the wrong girl. His grin wide, and I think we kidnapped a vampire instead of a wolf. I laughed. Are there really vampires? The 5 realms coexist right next to each other, he said, nodding his head. My eyes widened. There really are vampires. He grinned at me. Yep. I cocked my head to the side. 5. He nodded. The shifter realm is in the epicenter of the 5 realms, he explained. The north houses the vampires, the south housing both the 5 realms, the east housing the humans, and the west housing the witchlands. And how do you know where one piece of land ends and the other begins? My eyes wide. And if these realms are so close? He snorted. Trust me, you'll know how. I asked, are there like borders or something? In a way, he said, shaking his head. In order to cross the lands, you'd have to be a part of an ancestry. What? I asked in confusion. What does that mean? I'm horrible at explaining things. He apologized in advance. So let me try this again. In order for you to get into another realm, you must have a portion of that other realm's DNA running through your veins. Like, let's say you wanted to go back to the human realm. You can exit from our realm and enter the human realm only if you had a parent that was a human. Oh, I hummed, kind of like a key. Yeah, he said, like a special key only you have access to. So if I wanted to go back home, all I'd have to do would be to just cross the border to the east. He paused. That would be how it would work typically, but it might not work for you. Why not? Because you're a wolf, not a human. I blinked at him. But I lived in the human realm my entire life. Yes, but we don't know how that was possible. He cocked his head to the side. We're still trying to figure out how you managed to slip past the Penta's radar. What do you mean? The Penta should have put in more effort into trying to find you, he grumbles, when they realized what happened to your father. They should have shifted all their efforts into finding you and confirming your whereabouts. I thought the Penta said they found my birth mother lying next to my birth father during the fire. I said, wouldn't they have done some testing or stuff to confirm if that was really them? He pursed his lips. You don't think they ran confirmation tests? I don't know what I think, he sighed, but I don't think that the Penta tried as much as they should have. Isn't your parents on the council? I asked. You doubt your own parents? He let out a small laugh. You're not the first person that told me that. If I'm not first person that told you that, then apparently this issue has been discussed before. He shrugged, holding out a hand to help out the particular steep portion of the hill. You and Phoenix have surprisingly similar responses. I looked at him in horror. Phoenix told you the same thing. Enough about this, he said. Let's focus on the real reason we came here. The top of the hill came into view when he took a step away from me, leaving me breathless. The view from up here was indescribable, and so worth the treacherous hike. The academy looked minuscule compared to wide expanse of lush green land. It's beautiful, Yak Cassie Ann whispered. It really is. I turned my head and found Cassie Ann staring down at me, not the view in front of us. I bit my lip and looked away, cursing the stupid warmth that rose up my neck. Cassie Ann cleared his throat and took a step away from me, focusing on some type of flower nearby. These are called night weeds, he pointed out. They only grow at night and their roots usually increase in size about 5 to 10 feet at a time. And why are they important?
When you pick them at night.
After they bloom. Then you can grind them up and use them in special tonics or medicines. Their properties usually have a numbing effect that can spread throughout the body when used correctly. I raised a brow. Those little flowers do that much? He nodded. Sometimes the smallest things in life have the most impact him. I shook my head. I never really thought of it that way. He grinned at me, his eyes sparkling in the daylight. That is why I am the teacher and you are the student. Young grasshopper. Then by all means, Obi, I snorted. Teach me your ways. The sun was setting by the time we finished with our lesson for the day. Thank you, Cassie, and I said sincerely. I really appreciate you helping me with this. He smiled at me, holding out his hand to help me down from a particularly high rock. It isn't a problem, princess, he grinned. I think this is the most fun I've had in a long time. Now I know you're Eli. I laughed. You couldn't possibly have had fun on your day off. I'm serious, he said, grabbing the backpack from my hands and knocking his shoulder gently into mine. You were a great student. It definitely helped that you simplified a lot of things, I said, whenever I sit in Estrella's course. It always sounds like she's speaking another language. She's definitely overwhelming at times, he said, especially when she gets lost in her lectures. How are you able to make this class so easy? I honestly don't know, he said, palming the back of his neck. I think it helps that my mom's a scientist and she was always finding ways to integrate that stuff into my learning when I was younger. I looked over at him in surprise. Really? He nodded. When it was time for Mom to go back to work, she always felt guilty about leaving me at home with a nanny. He whirled something around his finger that I immediately recognized as the familiar ring that all three of the boys wore, so instead, she chose to bring me along. And it's just you? I asked. You don't have any siblings? No, he shook his head, smiling sadly at me. Shifters have a hard time reproducing as it is. My parents, they've been married the longest out of all the other heirs' parents. About 15 years longer. After their struggles to have a child of their own, they were just about to give up on their dream of having a family when my happy ass came along as I laughed. I bet it was a very happy surprise for them. I'm pretty sure they didn't believe I was really real until the day my mom's water broke. He snorted. They didn't even have a nursery put together or give me a name until I was about 2 weeks old. I glanced at him. And how did they come up with the name Cassian? His lips pursed. Cassian's my middle name. I raised an eyebrow. It's your first name then? He grimaced. I rather not say. That's not fair. I nudged him. You three know everything about me, but I know basically nothing about you all. I'll answer anything else, he groaned. Just not that question. My interest perked up at his words, wondering just how bad his first name had to be in order for him to go by his middle name. You know, I'll figure it out, I warned him, and when I do, I'll never call you by your middle name again. Good luck with that, princess, he smirked at me, because no one, not even the other two, know what my real name is. Where have you been? Ellis asked casually from his lazy perch across the couch. A sleeping Brutus snoring halfway on his chest and halfway on the couch. I gazed down at Atlas in equal parts shock and amazement. How did you get him to do that? Do what? He raised an eyebrow at me before looking down at my snoring dog Sleep. He does that a lot, actually. In case you didn't notice. I narrowed my eyes at him. You know what I meant, jackass. He chuckled, gently rubbing the pointy part of my elderly dog's head. I heard him crying for you when I was in the kitchen making lunch, he explained. I figured since I didn't know when you'd be back, it wouldn't hurt for him to come out and explore the house for a while. He was a good boy, only going into rooms with the open doors and didn't even bark once. I was fine leaving him alone and minding my own business on the couch when he suddenly came up, sniffed my elbow, and jumped on top of me. Wait, she has been sleeping like this for an hour and a half. He hates men, I whispered, never taking my eyes off of my content little guy. The shelter said that he adores women and small children, but has despised men ever since his last owners abused and neglected him. Every man he comes into contact with, he attacks them on sight. Atlas smiled at Brutus, gently scratching the underside of his chin, which had my dog leaning into his touch. He has been nothing but a sweetheart, he cooed, as you can see. My face is intact and I still have all of my fingers and toes. What sorcery is this? My mouth dropped open even further. What makes you so different? Atlas has an advantage, Cassian said, rolling his eyes as he handed me my backpack. He has been raised around all types of animals, both domestic and farm, all his life. His grandma in particular used to save elderly dogs that were left at the kill shelters, many of them happening to be bulldogs that were used and abused for breeding or baiting. My eyes snapped towards Atlas, who was looking down at Brutus with a fond look in his eyes. Animals are much easier to understand than people are, he said. Locking eyes with me, my grandmother taught me that animals aren't just animals. They're living beings with souls purer than our own. We don't deserve them or the endless amount of love they give us, no matter how broken they might seem. Chapter 16. Nova Nix. It was bound to happen. In fact, I'm surprised she didn't do it sooner. It's been exactly 1 month since my little run in the library with Saoirse and Wylin, not surprised that she chose to retaliate against me. I am surprised that it took this long. Jade spotted them the moment I did. Her quick intake of breath letting me know that whatever it read on the poster was bad. She attempted to reach for the poster and rip it off the wall when I stopped her, scanning the contents. "You think that this is supposed to hurt me?" I said calmly into the quiet hallway brimming with students whose gazes were bouncing back between me and a smirking Saoirse improud of where I come from. The gasps sounded from everywhere, and when I turned to confront Saoirse head-on, I found almost every shifter's face displaying some kind of horrified stare. "You hear that, everyone?" Saoirse cooed, her friends giggling from behind her. "Our newest heir here, your future leader, is a normie sympathizer, raised by her own kidnappers and forced to live amongst those monsters, sharing their ideas and way of life, looking down at us just because we're different and we're blessed with gifts their puny little minds couldn't even begin to comprehend." Whispers and sneers were pointed my way, a few muttered remarks ringing out from somewhere behind me. I glared at each and every one of them before locking eyes with Saoirse. If this was supposed to humiliate me or make me feel bad about where I come from, then you epic ally failed. "I don't think I did," she murmured, grinning at me as her eyes shifted around the crowded hall. It turned exactly how I imagined it would. While I didn't let any of the emotions play out on my face, I cursed at myself when I realized her intentions. This was meant for my public humiliation. This was meant to undermine my new status and get the shifters at this school to doubt my loyalties and intentions. What in the ever-loving fuck is going on here? A familiar voice barked as 3 sets of heavy footsteps sounded from behind us. I turned in time to watch the hallway part as 3 very pissed-off alphas approach us. At least a dozen posters clutched tightly in each of their fists, while Saoirse remained stock still. From the corner of my eye, I noticed that her clique took a giant step away from her. Cowards. Phoenix, Atlas, and Cassian stopped right in front of me, their eyes taking in both Saoirse and his tense positions. "What is the meaning of this, Saoirse?" Phoenix barked at her. She just fluttered her eyelashes innocently up at him. "Whatever do you mean, Phoenix?" "Cut the shit, foul," Atlas growled. "We know you orchestrated all of this." Her innocent act dropping as she sent Atlas's scathing look. "No one's talking to you, Lobo," she snapped. "Why don't you mind your own business for once?" "I am minding my business," he snapped at her. "When you decide to mess with one heir, you're messing with us all. Hence, making it our business." She ignored him, instead refocusing her attention on Phoenix. "I don't know who put up the posters," Nick, she lied, her tone completely doing a 180 and changing into a softer pitch as she gazed up at her ex-fiancé. "And I was just offering our newest heir here my help when you 3 showed up. It is, after all, one of my duties as the president of the Shifter Success Center." Cassian coughed. "Do you think we're dumb foul?" Atlas growled through gritted teeth. "I'm willing to bet that this has your filthy paw prints all over it." "Phoenix isn't dumb," she smiled. "He knows what I'm saying is the truth." This time, I could help but snort at her words. "Simone's delusional." "What was that?" Her angry gaze swung to me. "Got your tongue, normie lover." I was about to take a step forward when a hand clamped down around Saoirse's arm, pulling her away from me and into the middle of the onlooking crowd that, somehow, grew 5 times more in the last 5 minutes. "You're playing a dangerous game here, foul," Phoenix rumbled, the corner of his eyes tightening with anger. "Chef's our Lupine hair." At his words, Saoirse ripped her arm out of Phoenix's grip. "And you too is your foul heir, but I don't see you running to his defense when our pack started turning their backs on him at the untrue rumors," she hissed. "You won't even allow him inside your damn house." He crossed his arms, looking down at her with an uninterested look in his eyes. "You and I both know why that is. You've known us practically our whole lives," she seethed, pointing at me. "Yet you welcome the outsider freak in with open arms." "Careful, foul," Alice mocked. "Your jealousy is showing and it isn't pretty. You would know all about that." "Wouldn't you, Lobo?" she snapped, sneering at him. "How does it feel to be the only firstborn son in history whose own parents view him as a disappointment? My heir who couldn't even do his duty and marry their chosen fiancé and secure his pack's resources, instead having to pawn her off to his younger brother." The unadulterated rage that overcame me took my breath away. making something inside of me snap as I lurched towards her. Cassian's eyes wide and as reached forward and hooked an arm around my waist, locking me tightly into the side of his body. "It's no wonder why they won't let your brother into their house," I snarled, "if he's anything like you. A fucking snake. I wouldn't trust him within 10 feet of me, let alone inside my inner sanctum." Her eyes widened at my words as her entire face turned red in anger. "How dare!" She raised her arm to slap me, but with lightning quick movements, Kiss jerked me out of her reach as Alice caught her arm. "Enough," Phoenix snarled, his voice bringing everyone in the halls to their knees. "This ends here." Well, almost everyone fell to their knees. The only ones that remained standing were Phoenix, Atlas, Cassian, and me. And as hard as she tried, Saoirse just couldn't resist the power of an alpha heir's command. She gritted her teeth and sweat across her brow as she tried to raise her head from its bowed position. "Hear me loud and hear me clear, shifters," Phoenix started, his tone going deathly calm but his power never lessening from this moment on. "If any of you decide to pull another one of these stunts with our newest heir, you are officially declaring war on all the heirs. I will not stand for bullying of any kind, especially when it comes from the packs under my care." "Neither will I," Atlas growled, inserting his own alpha power. "Nor I," Cassian said, adding his power to the mix as well, "and if any of you have a problem with that, you'll know where to find me." "Word of the wise shifters," Phoenix growled, locking eyes with each and every shifter that he could, all of them shifting around nervously. "I would think very carefully about where your alliances lie, because when you aim for these crowns, you best not miss. Best of luck to anyone who tries." "Atlas, what are we going to do, Phoenix?" I whirled on my friend as soon as we crossed the threshold to our own secret chamber. Getting deep within the library's labyrinth foul just added more doubts to their heads, and if we keep going at this rate, we'll have a rebellion on our hands. After the threat we sent to our packs, and the message was well received by most, the crowd dispersed and we let Headmaster Court as deal with Saoirse Fowl's insubordination. Because while though she was, nor ever be and dare, she still is Heir Fowl's niece and therefore technically untouchable. Well, untouchable that until we can prove that she and her brother are bastards born from a low-ranking soldier in the Fowl Pack ranks. Before we had a chance to say anything, Nova dragged Jade somewhere to presumably cool off. And while I was anxious that she's somewhere on campus, alone, my mind was eased slightly at the thought that this was about the time my brother started his shift as her shadow and guard. Because while she thought she had free reign of the academy, the Penta thought it would be in her best interest if she had a guard with her at all times. And since we didn't trust the Penta's guards at all, since they were brainless zombies that only answered to their beck and calls, Cassian, Phoenix, and I thought it would be in our best interest if the guards assigned to Nova were people that we trusted immediately. Hence why my two out of her brothers were a part of her guard rotation. They wouldn't dare try their hand at a rebellion. Phoenix's scowl deepened not with the rising tensions between the vampires and the Fae. "We bought some more time," Cass argued. "Whatever plans they had involving her were put on hold the moment we declared our intentions, but that won't last for long. You know there's always that one little bastard that likes to challenge us." I nodded in agreement. "And what if we're not there to protect her?" I said, crossing my arms as I leaned against the cold stone wall. "We got lucky this time, because we found that little idiot hanging up the posters at the entrance of the school. What happens when Fowl decides to go in war? Discreet route that could end up with Nova being more than just humiliated. You need to control Saoirse," Phoenix Cassian said, glaring our best friend Shess getting out of hand. "First the library encounter and now this. What's next? An ambush during a class they share." Nyx glared right back at him, snapping, "What do you propose I do, fuckface?" You know she doesn't exactly listen to reason, especially when I'm the one giving it. "Make her listen, man," I said, "or else threaten her to her crazy ass to the council." He shot me a deadpan look. "Don't you think I've tried that?" And Cass asked. And the lunatic just laughed in my face. He groaned, said that she'd love to have a meeting with the council since she has so much to say since our engagement was called off. This is exactly why we should report her to the Penta, I said seriously. She's gotten away with too much already and thinks she's untouchable just because her hag of an aunt is still on the council. Imagine what you would have done if you two was actually inducted as an heir. She kind of is untouchable at this point though, Cass said, frowning because if Nix brings up charges against her, Fowl could just spin it and say the HES being a bitter ex. My beta's mate is in Fowl's pack and says that Saoirse telling everyone she broke off the engagement because she found out that Nix was the man she thought he was. Then why can't me or Cass from a complaint? Because everyone in the entire universe knows that you hate her guts, he pointed out, and I can't file a complaint because then Fowl would get spiteful and cut off the packs at the Crescent Canal, the only place where Mom's synthetic aconite grows. Aconite. Need I remind you? We need for the loans. Fucking loans, I sighed, always ruining something or another. Loans were a big problem for all of our packs because unlike rogues, the werewolves who chose a life of solitude and loneliness away from a pack on the outskirts of our realm. Recently though, the normally peaceful nomadic wolves started acting unusual and began attacking not only our borders but terrorizing the borders near the other realms too. According to the Penta, they've received word from the other 4 councils that these wolves were almost zombie-like, not listening to reasoning and only acting on instinct to find whatever is they were looking for, and had to be put down accordingly. And while I hated the fact, considering our numbers were slowly but surely dwindling away, I knew from personal experience that a shifter who was in control of their wolf was dangerous. What are we going to do then? We do what we always do, a dangerous glint lit Phoenix's eyes. We sit and wait for our prey to make a mistake, and then go in for the kill. Chapter 17 Nova. I growled, muttering profanities to myself as I stomped back and forth across the space in the Lil's End garden behind the university that Jade dragged me to. Jade murmured, I mean, that was the worst I've seen her be to someone. I paused, sending her a look. She gets worse. Jade nodded. One time, this girl I knew had to drop out of the academy because Saoirse thought she was ogling Alpha Fenrir. I gaped at her. She made someone drop out because she didn't like a girl looking at Phoenix. And the worst part was that the girl wasn't even looking at him. Jade sighed. She just had a lazy eye. I choked on a gasp. What the hell? Poor girl was bullied so bad that she became alone. I stared at her in confusion. What's alone? She blinked at me. Sometimes I forget how little you know for being an heir. Tell me about it, I sighed. I feel like I'm always the last to know things. It'll get better the longer you're here, she said. Her tone sympathetic. You have to remember that we were all raised around this lifestyle. It's a lot to condense 19 years of learning into a few days of being here. I sent her a smile. That's why you're quickly becoming one of my newest best friends. An honor I gladly accept. She smiled back at me. Alone is a wolf who chooses a life outside of a pack. Like a rogue. Her lips quirked. How do you know about rogues? I read a lot of supernatural romances. I shrugged. Some of the authors like to explain pack dynamics to their readers. Well then, she said, what do you know about rogues? Not a lot, I admitted, only that they're usually the bad guys in stories. That's partially correct, Jade said. Rogues are the wolves who are thrown out of packs after they commit unspeakable crimes. Wolves who were a part of packs usually suffer from withdrawals when suddenly cut off, as rogues arise when the insanity takes over from being detached from their packs for too long, causing them to lose all sense of rationality and moral righteousness. After a while, their humanity becomes non-existent as they're led by their predatory instincts, killing anything in sight without hesitation. Can they be cured? I asked in curiosity. She shook her head. The Pentas tried to figure out a way to tame them and reverse the psychosis, but nothing they've ever tried has worked. So what happens to them? They're usually put down. What? I guessed they're killed. And that's the only way. She nodded. And every one's okay with that. It may sound awful, Nova, but that's the way it is, she murmured, because when it comes down to it, it's either us or them. You don't sound too sad about that, I observed. Her lips pursed. Rogues are a touchy subject for me and my family. I sent her a questioning look. My older sister was killed by a rogue when I was 10, she whispered. She was walking home after school, on our pack's territory, when a rogue wolf stumbled out of the woods and into her path. My parents scowled and have an open casket for people to share their respects because my sister was in pieces and unrecognizable. A lone tear rolled down her face as she gazed at a small patch of orchids growing right next to us. I sucked in a sharp breath. "I'm so sorry, Jade. I'm not telling you this because I want your pity, Nova," she murmured. "I'm telling you this because rogues are more dangerous than any of those authors who wrote those books could even imagine. I don't want you to end up like my sister." I sat down next to her, nudging her shoulder with mine. "Thank you for sharing that with me, Jade. What are new best friends for?" She nudged me. "Plus, what kind of wolf would I be if I didn't warn the Lupine of potential dangers from her own people?" I was about to mutter a smart-ass comment when suddenly I felt this prickle of awareness in the base of my neck. Jade opened her mouth to say something when I pressed a finger to my lips, choosing her, moving as silently as I could. I leaned over and grabbed a medium-sized rock from beside the stone bench we were currently on, stronger than I knew I was capable of. I threw the rock as hard as I could at the tree 20 feet away from us. A loud curse followed by rustles of leaves and a thump as a body hit the floor greeted my ears. Jade jumped up in fright, clutching my arm. "What the hell was that?" "I don't know," I growled, "but I'm about to find out." "Stay here. Are you out of your mind?" she hissed, yanking back on my arm. "What if it's a rogue? Did you listen to nothing I just told you?" I paused. "Can the rogues break through the Academy's wards?" She swallowed. "I don't think so." "Then chances are that this isn't a rogue we're dealing with," I said, unhooking her hand from mine and stomping over towards the figure that was still cursing and clutching his head. "Who are you?" I demanded, toeing the dark-haired guy's leg with the toe of my dox. "And why were you hiding in the tree?" "Spying on us." "God damn," he rumbled. "My brother told me you were feisty, but he didn't tell me you had the arm of a professional quarterback." "Who's your brother?" He looked up at me then, and I didn't even have to hear the next words that came out of his mouth to confirm whose brother sat before me. The eyes gave him away. The same unique amber shade that captivated me from the first moment we met. "Which Lobo brother are you?" I barked down at him. He gazed up at me in surprise. "You know who I am." "I know you're Atlas brother," I confirmed, "but I don't know which one." "How do you know I'm Alice brother?" he questioned. "We look nothing alike, and for safety reasons no one knows what we look like." Hell, no one even knows Atlas has more than 2 brothers. So the question is, how do you know who I am? The eyes gave it away. I said, "You have the same eyes as your brother, except now that I'm looking at them. Yours are a little more golden than amber." He stood then, dusting off the dirt from his jeans, and making me glare up at him. He was tall, way taller than me, but not as tall as his brother. The eyes were probably the only similarity the brothers shared because if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be able to tell that the man in front of me was related to my surly roommate in any way. Where Atlas was tall, dark, brooding, and covered in tattoos, his brother radiated an alluring and warm aura. He was also tattoo-less and sporting dirty blonde hair that reached past his shoulders in a way that made him look more like a male model and less like a spy. He was attractive to say the least, but not as attractive as his brother was. "Exlo," he sighed, holding out his hand to me, "and my brother's going to kill me." I raised a brow and shook his hand. "You still haven't answered my question." "What question?" "Which brother are you?" "The second youngest." He ran a hand through his hair, "and the sexiest one out of the Lobo clan." My lips quirked up fractionally. "And why were you spying on us?" His lips pursed. "Exlo, why were you spying on us?" I asked again. This time, he gave me a pained look. "Exlo, why were you spying on us?" Jade stuttered from behind me, making both of us look her way. "I don't think he can tell you, Nova." "Why not?" "Sometimes, alphas can order their pack members to follow their commands without complaint. When that happens, we're bound to follow their commands implicitly and cannot speak a word about it to anyone else. So he can't tell me because he was forced not to." She nodded. I narrowed my eyes at Exlo, gripping him by the ear the same time I motioned for Jade to follow me. Oh well. "Oh, he wind as we may outweigh outside of the garden. Where are you taking me?" I ignored his question, instead focusing my attention on Jade. "Can you make it back to your dorm safely while I deal with this?" She nodded, her gaze straying to Exlo momentarily before meeting my gaze again. Perfect, I said, dragging my little spy behind me and stomping back to my dorm. Let's go, little Lobo. When he realized where we were headed, he dug his feet into the dirt as hard as he could. You can't take me in there, he said, panicking if they find out that my cover's been blown. My ass is grass. They'll skin me alive and hang my fur over their fireplace. Calm down, little Lobo, I reassured him. There will be no skinning of furs tonight. I'll make sure of it. You obviously don't think my brother or his friends are capable of, he exclaimed dearly. I've seen them skin someone for less. I threw open the front door and called out to the Three Stooges, pushing Xlo onto the closest armchair near me. Though I smirked down at him stay. The look of outrage he gave sent me almost made the giggles I held back burst forth. What's with all this noise? Phoenix trailed off when he saw a pouting Xlo sulking on our armchair. Shit is right, I narrowed my eyes at Alice as he slowly walked into the living room, his eyes focusing on his baby brother Care, explaining why I had a little stalker watching me from a tree. How in the hell did she make you? Atlas barked at his brother. Ignoring my question, I helped train you myself. Apparently not good enough, Phoenix murmured, which had Atlas shooting him a nasty glare. I don't know, Xlo grumbled. 1 second, I was watching her like I normally do, in the next, I was being pelted in the head with a rock the size of a small dog. It happened so fast that I didn't have a chance to hide. 3 sets of eyes shot over to me. How did you know he was there? Cassian asked, curiosity lacing his tone. Xlo is not only the best royal guard we know, but HES considered the best assassin in all the packs. My eyes slid to the boy that couldn't be older than 17. HES an assassin, hey? Xlo said indignantly. Sitting up straighter in the armchair. Age has nothing to do with my talent and skill sets. Just because I'm not 100-plus-year-old doesn't mean I'm not great at what I do. I didn't say you sucked at your job, I narrowed my eyes at him. I just meant that you're really young considering your occupation. He harm-fed and sat back into his chair, grumbling. I locked eyes with Atlas. How many brothers do you have? His lips pursed as he gazed down at his brother. I could tell they were having a silent conversation with each other by the small shakes of their heads and narrowing of eyes. Officially, I have 2 brothers, he sighed after a moment, and officially, I have 4 brothers in total. My eyes widened. Why are you hiding the other 2? I'm not hiding them, he said. I'm giving them the choice that I never had. At my look of confusion, Xlo chimed in softly. He did it to protect us. My eyes snapped to Atlas, urging him to elaborate further. In the firstborn, he started explaining, I never had the choice in the matter of whether I was to be a part of the public eye. The moment I was born was the moment that my life was no longer my own. I was created for the survival of the pack, a title I revere greatly. However, with the privileges that this life has, it also has its misfortunes. Mainly, the fact that no matter how powerful you are, there will always be someone in the shadows waiting for the opportunity to eliminate you. My second brother was in the similar boat as me. He continued being the spare, the backup. He needed to be in the public eye in case anything were to happen to me. My third brother's birth was leaked to the media on purpose by a bitter friend of my mother's that betrayed her. Because of that, I ensured that Luciana kept her pregnancies with my younger brothers a secret. Who's Luciana? I questioned, finding it weird that he would call his mother by her first name. My mother, Xlo said softly, my youngest brother and I share the same mother. I looked towards Atlas in surprise. You have different mothers. She's my mother too, he groaned, pinching the bridge of his nose. I had 2 mothers. I was thoroughly confused at this point. Something Phoenix pointed out in the next moment. Great. You've confused her, you jackass. I don't know how to explain this to her without freaking her the fuck out. Atlas muttered. I'll explain it to her. Xlo volunteered. No, all 3 men exclaimed at once, making Xlo pout and cross his arms as he leaned back in his seat. Explain what to me? In our community we're blessed with something called mates, Phoenix explained, triggering something in my mind. I've heard that term, I murmured to myself, racking through my brain's memories. Where have I had that term before? The Penta asked if my parents were mates. I snapped my fingers as the memory filtered into my mind, and one of my professors briefly mentioned something about mates in passing. What are mates? Mates are the one person in the world that is made specifically for you. The person or persons you're drawn to for an unknown and indescribable reason. You share a love so strong and deep with them that you end up questioning if the love you've experienced prior to meeting them is ever truly love at all. Mates carry a piece of your soul and connect with you in a way where no one else will understand. They bring you peace, calmness, and happiness in a way no one else could. Mates accept you for who you truly are and are loyal to no end, loving you until they take their last dying breath. By the time Phoenix finished explaining what mates were, I was breathless. That was breathtakingly beautiful. You said person or persons. I noted. What does that mean? The boys looked at each other, having a silent conversation of their own. It was interesting watching Cassian's face tighten in anger and Phoenix's continual head shakes. Mates are rare these days, Atlas said slowly, but when they do happen, you typically only get one in your lifetime. But there are even rarer occasions in which someone could have more than one mate in their lifetime. Cassian chimed in. My mother died in childbirth with my third brother when I was 10. Atlas explained. The jealous friend that told the world about her pregnancy was the primary nurse, a part of her medical team. She purposefully let my mother die instead of intervening when she should have. My mother was his mother's youngest. Sister Exlo supplied apparently. The bond between our father and my mother snapped into place the moment she stepped foot inside the cathedral for the funeral. I winced at the statement, knowing it must have been hard for Atlas to watch his father move on from his mother so quickly after her death. Who was his mate? What? You said you only get one mate in your lifetime. I questioned, and if that's true, then who was your father's true mate? Apparently. Our father was one of the rare exceptions, Atlas said, because both my mom and Luciana were his mates. Just in different times. You can't have multiple mates at one time, Phoenix said, and if you are destined for more than one mate, they can't exist at the same time. So that means you're only supposed to be blessed with one mate in your lifetime, Phoenix surmised. No, one is lucky enough to have more than one mate at a time.